Hi and welcome to today's episode, which is going to be all about taking a classic favourite dessert and turning it into a cookie. In my head, what we're doing today is taking an apple and rhubarb crumble, or crisp if you're in the States, and we're going to turn that into a cookie. So I've been out in the garden this morning harvesting some rhubarb. I've got a few stalks of it. So I'm going to make an apple and rhubarb fruit butter, and then I'm going to use that to stuff some cookies. I've taken the cookie dough recipe from the gluten-free cookies that I did, the chocolate chip ones, and I'm going to base the proportions on that, but then I'm going to try a few different things. When I did those cookies, because I'd used the gluten-free flour, it felt very starchy against my teeth and kind of that squeaky sort of feeling like when you chew cotton wool or chalk, if you ever did that as a child, like I did. And I thought at the time it'd be interesting to split the gluten-free flour with chickpea flour, so we're going to try and do that today. I'm going to start the fruit cooking while I then do the cookie dough, but first I want to make a flax egg. This is ground flax seeds, so I got the quantity wrong. I did a tablespoon of flax seeds, but normally I think I do a teaspoon of whole flax seeds, and that gives you a tablespoon of ground flax seeds. Or you can just use, if you've got a bag of ground flax, I think they call it flax meal maybe. But anyway, we need a tablespoon of that, and then we're going to add 3 tablespoons of hot water. So this is water that's boiled in the kettle, but it's been boiled for a good kind of half an hour, so it's just kind of hot rather than scalding hot. Give that a whisk. So you can see it thickens up straight away, but that's going to get really, really thick and gloopy. So I'll just leave that to the side, let it do its thing. The last few times that I've made fruit butters, I've done it in the oven to cook the fruit to start with. But because I'm baking the cookies, I just thought it might be a bad idea to have cookies baking in such a humid environment. I'm going to cook the fruit in the Instant Pot separately, and then I can just put the lid on and forget about it. And then once the cookies are done, then I can get the butter into the oven. So I've got around 1 kilo of rhubarb, and then I think that was about 1100 grams of cooking apples. I normally use Granny Smith apples and pears as the base, but I thought it might be interesting to try making the butter with cooking apples, because then I can start shoving loads of sugar in it. My plan is to mix a load of icing sugar into the butter, and then hopefully that will set really firm. We'll see. All I'm going to do for the apples is just cut it into smaller pieces, and then all of it goes in. You don't need to bother peeling it, you don't need to take the core out, nothing like that. So it is super easy. Maybe chop that down into chunks that kind of size. I'm leaving the cores in because that's where the bulk of the pectin is, and that's the kind of gelling agent that then creates the sort of buttery consistency. Same thing with the rhubarb, just chop that down into pieces. You don't need to peel it or anything, because everything's going to get chucked in the blender. So that's everything chopped down. So I'm just going to kind of give it a bit of a mix. When you're using an Instant Pot, you need to have liquid in there, otherwise it's just going to shut itself down. So I'm going to use some apple juice. You can use water, but I thought, why use water if I can put a bit of extra flavour in there? Half a cup, maybe, something like that. You just want enough to cover the bottom. Doesn't need to be a big pool of it or anything, but just some at the bottom. So I'm going to pressure cook it for 20 minutes on high. I'm preheating the oven at 180°C, which is about 350 Fahrenheit. This is a fan oven though, so yeah, you might have to go a bit higher if yours isn't a fan. Got 110 grams of vegan butter. It's about half a cup, so I'm just going to stick that in the microwave until it melts, about a minute or so usually. That's where we are with the flax eggs. I've decided I'm going to use maple syrup in this. I just want to try it and see what the flavour is, what the texture's like. I might have to then adjust the dry ingredients a little bit, but we'll see. So I'm going to do 200 grams of maple syrup. I'm going to whisk the flax mixture into that. As I'm doing it, I'm wondering if I should have just done the dried flax seeds, like the flax meal, straight into the maple syrup, because there's lots of liquid that it could have swollen into. And then I'm going to mix the butter into that. So I'll do half a teaspoon of sea salt. I'll do a tablespoon of vanilla extract. Sounds a lot, but the chickpea flour's got quite an intense flavour. Give that a mix and then push that to the side. The Instant Pot's just beeped at me and it's saying food burn. So let's go have a look and see if I can diagnose the problem. I think I'm gonna have to add more juice. So that's the message I'm getting. Yeah, I think the apple has broken down really quickly and then caught on the bottom of the pan. So I'm just giving it a good scrape. But this had literally been on, I don't know, 6-7 minutes. It hadn't even come to pressure yet. Throw in a bit more juice. That's another, I don't know, 50 mils something. I might turn the pressure down. I'm gonna do it on normal, I think, for 20 minutes, and hopefully the heat then won't be quite as intense on the bottom. I need 270 grams of flour, which is about 2 cups. So I'm going to do half gluten-free flour and half chickpea flour. So I'll sieve the gluten-free flour through, and then I'll do the chickpea flour on top. Sieving flour isn't necessarily mandatory, but you do get some more air into the mixture. And with the chickpea flour, you get really bad lumps and they are very difficult to get back out again. In fact, I am going to say yes, it's mandatory. I'm going to do a teaspoon of baking soda. There's a big old lump in there, so I'm going to sieve it. And the baking soda is going to give a little bit of lightness, a bit of lift. Combine those together. I've got 50 grams of hazelnuts that I've chopped and toasted. It's about half a cup. And then I've got 65 grams, about 2/3 of a cup-ish, of jumbo oats that I toasted as well. So I'm going to pop in all of the hazelnuts. I might do most of the oats, but leave some back, just because I don't want to overwhelm it with oats. So I'll leave about that much. I'll mix that in and then see how it's looking. Pop them all in, why not? Because they might help with the amount of liquid that I need to get in there as well. Pushing a hole in the middle, and that's where I'll pour the wet mixture into. I think I'll pour half in and then give it a blend and then do the other half. Pour the rest of the mixture in. So it's maybe not as bad as I thought it was gonna be, but I might add in a little bit more flour, just because that's very pasty. I think it needs to be a little bit thicker. I'm going to do another tablespoon of each. I do another tablespoon of each just to be on the safe side. So I've got wet hands. Okay, yeah, so it'll roll. Yeah, so I've got about 38 grams there. I'll roll that and see what that does. I've got 2 baking trays set up with silicone mats on them. Just nice non-stick surface. Hands are wet again. I just don't want to handle it too much because it gets very sticky. And then pop it on the tray and then kind of shape it on there. So I'll see you once all of these are rolled out. So I've got 20 cookies. So they're all pressed out, ready to go in the oven. I'm going to put them in the oven and set the timer for 15 minutes. Cookies have had 12 minutes, probably more like 12 and a half now. So I'm going to whip them out. These are the ones that were underneath. I'm just going to pop them in for another minute, maybe. These are the ones that were on the top shelf. They're all even in colour. So I think they're okay. So I'll just pop them directly onto the rack and then they can cool down nice and evenly. So the underneath ones that I've moved up, I've given them an extra 4 minutes, I want to say, so far. They'll probably have 5 or 6, but just compare it to the other ones, just so they're even in colour. With the ice cream sandwiches, what I did was kind of paired up the sizes just because they're slightly irregular. So yeah, I'll probably do a similar thing to this. So taking the second batch out, so they're roughly the same kind of colour. So I'll just leave them for a couple of minutes to cool down a little bit further and then I can take them off the mat. So it's time to look at the fruit. So I'll grab that from the Instant Pot. Here's the fruit. Everything feels nice and soft. So I'll pop that into the blender and then I've just seen why the Instant Pot shut down. That big burnt patch there. Had that running for about 30 seconds or so. Shouldn't need much work, it's just mush. As it was blending, I'd half considered doing like a close-up in the blender. Really glad I didn't. And then just use a spoon to work it through. This isn't an essential part, but you're probably going to end up with little bits of apple core and that kind of thing. So it's to get a really nice smooth mouthfeel, but feel free to skip this stage if you want. All of it's sieved, so yeah, you can see all the little flecks in the bottom. So that's why I prefer sieving it. Just going to give it a quick stir to kind of even it out, just because some parts are a bit more liquid than others. Slide this into the oven. That's going to be in there for at least an hour, maybe probably more, closer to 2 for that volume. Bear in mind that the higher the temperature, the more often you're going to have to stir it. So I think I might crank it up to, I'm going to do 200 and then see what it's like after 10 minutes and then pull it out and we'll have a look. Fruit's had about 15 minutes. I don't think much has changed looking at it through the window. Yeah, actually I can see it has lost volume already because where this mark is, that's where it was up to. Give it a little stir, especially around the sides. Get that build up off because that's where the problems for washing up start happening. And the skin that eventually will start developing on the top. If you stir it in, it sort of melts back into the main mix. Rhubarb has a load of natural pectin in it. As I discovered when I did the rhubarb and custard tarts, the poaching liquid, I chucked that in a bottle. I thought I'll have that as a drink, and it just turned into jelly. So I don't know if that's going to have any effect on the butter itself. You know, I don't know if that's going to do anything positive or negative. We'll find out. I've cranked it up to 250, which is about 475 Fahrenheit. The more this reduces, the quicker it's going to start colouring on top. So I will have to reduce that temperature, probably after the second time of stirring, thereabouts, but I'm just going to keep a really close eye on it. In case you haven't come across a fruit butter before, this is what we're going to end up with. That's the prune butter. That's old now. Gosh, that must be at least a year old, something like that, and it still tastes incredible. But yeah, so it's really thick and shiny and beautiful. Once I've got it down as far as it'll go without it starting to burn, I think I might then tip it into a cool baking pan, just so that it cool down with a maximum surface area, because that's going to need to be cold before I start putting the sugar in, so then I can get a good idea of how it's pasting. We've now got some fruit butter. The apple and rhubarb has all been buttered. I've weighed it and I've got 545 grams of butter. Now that blender is a 2 litre max fill, and I was about that much over the top, so there was probably 2.2 litres, so that's 2,200 mils. That roughly converts into grams, like for like. So yeah, it's reduced considerably. Probably I've got about a quarter of the weight that I started with. If the notes on my board are correct, I did an hour at 250, 10 minutes at 200, and then 30 minutes at 160. Stirred it every kind of 15 minutes or so. So I first dropped it when I noticed little brown patches starting to appear on the top. Then I could start seeing sort of black bits, like little spikes where ridges had formed. You'll know you're getting close to the end when you open the oven door and you don't get assaulted by a load of steam. That's a great way of knowing that most of the moisture's come out of it. If your roasting pan looks the same as mine did, don't be horrified. All you need to do is fill up the roasting pan with boiling water and then drop in a dishwasher tablet. That's the fastest way of getting it off. If it's not a non-stick pan, you can use a dishwasher tablet like an eraser almost, but don't do that if it's non-stick. I've done that on a frying pan and gone straight through the coating. You've been warned. I'm still soaking the pan, but I've just pulled that off. So yeah, it does lift off very easily. And there's minimal sugar in there, so it shouldn't burn on too bad. The next step is to now sweeten the butter. So I'm going to use icing sugar. I think it's called powdered sugar in the States. It's the powdery stuff, funnily enough. I think I'll do 2 tablespoons to start with, mix that in and then see what we're looking like. It's very lumpy, so I am going to sieve it into the bowl. So I'll work that in and then we'll see how we're looking. I'll try a bit, see what it's like. I think I might do another 2. I could eat it like that, but it is very aggressive here. Work that in. Now this doesn't look any different than any of the other butters I've made. So I guess the amount of pectin that's in the rhubarb hasn't really had an impact as such. I wasn't sure if it would. It's not as glossy as the prune butter, and I'm not really sure why that would be, but along with the apple butter stuffing, I'm also going to stick in some cream cheese frosting. Now that was left over from the chocolate stout cake that I made, the one that had the praline paste in the middle. Once I'd frosted the cake, I had some left over, so I just chucked it back in the cream cheese tub and then stuck it in the freezer for a few months, thinking I'll do something with it. And then last night in bed, I was like, oh, that would be good in there. So I defrosted it. Now I had a moment of panic thinking this is just turned into liquid. So I put some on a plate to check if it would set, and it is more or less setting. It's not as bad as I feared it was. I'll do cream cheese frosting on half of the cookies, and then on the other half I'll do the apple butter. I'll leave it for a few hours, and then when I go to bed, I'll sandwich them together, maybe even overnight, leave them, and then sandwich them in the morning, just to allow that frosting to dry out a little bit in the air, because it's a little bit warm in the kitchen. So, and then hopefully I think that will be fine. So let's stick one together and then eat it. We can see how amazing it is. So I've grabbed 2 of the cookies. So the texture, I'm not going to squeeze it loads, but it's slightly cakey a little bit. If you've had a fig Newton, like a fig roll, it's that kind of texture. That's what the cookies remind me of. So I think that's going to be perfect. That's the top of it. So I'm going to do it on the flat part, and then kind of spread it around. So if I can get a side profile, it's about, yeah, like 1 millimeter, something like that. But by all means, pack it in there if you really want loads. So that's the frosting there. So I'm going to do, again, about the same kind of amount. Just spread it around. So I've got my 2 halves, and we'll make them whole. Just Just squidge them together, like so. Yes. Once I've wrapped up with you, what I'm going to do is put the same amount on the rest of the cookies, leave them open, and then yeah, I'll make a decision whether to do it before I go to bed this evening or maybe do it in the morning, just sandwich them together. And then I think that'll give it enough time to partly dry out in the air, but also for the cookie to kind of absorb a bit of the liquid as well. So it looks fairly unassuming like that, but then you just know there's good stuff inside. Let's go for it. Yes. Yes. It's quite a soft cookie, so if you prefer a really crunchy type like a ginger snap, it's not that type, so this probably isn't one for you. But it's very tender, breaks down nicely. I don't know if there's a noticeable difference from the ice cream sandwiches. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's any value to mixing the flours the way I did. So you could probably just go gram flour. At some point I might try doing them with just the gluten-free flour and see what happens, see what it does to the texture. We've got the apple and rhubarb tanginess, but it's slightly tempered by the sugar that we put in there. But then that with the hazelnuts in the cookie, and then the cream cheese frosting just adds a really nice roundness to the flavour. Oh, it's delicious. These can be easily customised. Lots of different options with your fruit butters, with the nuts. You could put dried fruit in the cookies as well if you really wanted to. That'd be absolutely fine and delicious. Hit subscribe and tap the bell icon if you're also a fan of delicious things sandwiched in delicious things.